Parashat Vayechi, but we're going to start in verse 1 of Genesis 47. We have some really amazing things. This is going to tie in at the very end of this chapter. It's going to tie in with Joseph's second dream. Well, both dreams, both are the same, but you will see it in a beautiful way. All right. Then Joseph went in and told Pharaoh and said, I want you to, if you track with us, every time you see the word to go in or went in, you're like, oh, it's this yatzah. It's this yatzah, right? But in this case, it is not. And this is going to happen several times in this chapter where it speaks about going or going out. And it is not using the word yatzah, which is the word for the Exodus, right? To go out. Except for one time. It uses it in this chapter maybe 4 or 5 times. Except for one time, it's like the Spirit of God is holding back on using this word, the word yatzah, because he has one occasion he wants to use it intentionally, and you'll see it. It's really beautiful. So then Joseph went in and told Pharaoh and said, my father and my brothers, I'm leaving the Hebrew here because I'm going to need it in a little bit. My father and my brothers and their flocks and their herds and all that they have, everything, have come out of the land of Canaan. Again, you will think, oh, is this the word yatzah, right? Have come out. Nope, it's the word bo. Because it wasn't an exodus. They didn't have a Pharaoh oppressing them. They're in the land that is promised to them. So they have come out of the land of Canaan, and behold, they are in the land of Goshen. Don't miss the fact that Joseph is, in a wise way, positioning not only himself but his family as shepherds, because the Egyptians hated shepherds. They didn't want anything to do with them. Their religion. I think it had to do with clean and unclean, but I'm working from memory on that, but good question. Verse 2, he took 5 men from among his brothers and presented them to Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to his brothers, what is your occupation? So they said to Pharaoh, your servants are shepherds. Again. But also remember that in Genesis, when you are presented as a shepherd, that means you're the good guy. That's what that means. You're like Abel. So this is if you were writing literature, like if you were writing English literature or studying English literature, then you would call this a characterization. This is a characterization. This is speaking, the author is giving you information about the people that he's talking about. Yeah, he's telling you he's telling you they are the good guys. So your servants are shepherds, both we and our fathers. And they said to Pharaoh, we have come to sojourn. Important word here. Sojourners, gerim, sojourner. To sojourn, gur. So we have come to sojourn in the land. So this is the verb form, right? We've come to sojourn in the land, for there is no pasture for your servants' flocks, for the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. I wasn't planning on speaking on this word severe. You see, I didn't have it highlighted, but I can't help it. The word severe, you have a severe famine, but the word severe is kaved. You get the word kavod, which is glory. But the meaning of the word is actually heaviness. So this is a heavy famine. In other words, there's some spiritual here. That's what that means. And so So Joseph is saying we are sojourners here. We are foreigners. That's the idea. And we own no land. That's the key. When you're a sojourner, you don't own land. You don't own land in the ancient time. That's how it worked. So it says, now therefore please let your servants live. Okay, we're going to be taking a look at this word live, and you see I put a different color because we're going to see it several times. But this word to live is actually, it actually means to dwell, yashav, to dwell. And you're going to see how there's a contrast with the actual word to live. So, please let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen. So, Joseph is making a bold petition here. Because you see, the land of Goshen is easily identifiable on a map. Whenever you've seen a map, I'm sure you've seen a map of Egypt, either in the news or on your Bibles. And you see the delta, right, where the Nile River that flows up north, it's flowing up, and then you see the delta with all the river kind of breaks up into parts, and then it goes into the Mediterranean, right? So that all that land, that's Goshen. And it was the best land of Egypt because the river overflowing watered everything. And so it made that piece of land extremely fruitful. And so very good not only for agriculture but also for cattle raising. So he's asking for the best land. In verse 5, then Pharaoh said to Joseph, your father and your brothers have come to you. You see the word come, bo. We're still not using the word yatzah, the word for the Exodus. He's holding it back. He's creating tension, so to speak, by not using the word. You've got to read, you've got to get into the text, right? The text itself is a world in itself. Verse 6, the land of Egypt is at your disposal. Settle, now it is translated even better. Now it's the same word yashav, the same word to dwell, to settle in. They should have translated it settle all throughout because you can see it down below here. It's the same word. And they went back, even in the same verse, they translated it different. You know? So that kind of throws you off a little bit. So settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. That's pretty cool. The best of the land. But it gets even better when you look at the Hebrew and you realize the word for best is the word tov. As in good and evil. Right? We've talked about this over and over. The word for good, you know, Genesis 1, and God saw that it was good, and God saw that it was good. Why? Because he made the land extremely fruitful. So this land, this piece of land, Goshen, in Egypt, that is given to Jacob and his family, is good. It's good. So let them dwell, right? Let them settle in the land of Goshen. And if you know any capable men, I love this, because this is the same word for Proverbs 31. An excellent wife. This is the guy version of that. Yeah. And the guy version means two things primarily. It means that you are a soldier. You're a brave soldier. A man of valor. And it also means that you're a successful man. So basically, you got out of the military, you started your own business, and you were an awesome soldier, and now you're an awesome businessman. That's what that means. And this word is used of Ruth, right? The woman version of it, and Boaz in the book of Ruth. It's used of both of them. You know, it's beautiful. So that's what Pharaoh is saying. And if you know any successful men among your brothers, then put them in charge of my livestock. I want to pause here real quick because a few weeks ago we talked about Joseph and his dreams and possibly the area that where he actually kind of failed, so to speak, which we saw that it was not so much that he ran his big mouth, right, and talking about the dreams, and all that stuff, and which is just bad in itself. But even more so is that he brought an evil report about his brothers, right? He brought an evil report. He learned a lesson here. Because old Joseph, young Joseph, would have said, "Oh, these guys are rascals." That's basically what he told his father. These guys are rascals. And actually, if I remember correctly, the verb the word that he used was actually evil. He used the word ra about them, the word evil. Now he's completely changed, right? So he's bringing a good report about his brothers. But look at this. I want you to look at this. It's just amazing. Because what are we talking about here? We're talking about the end times, are we not? This is reaching the climax of Genesis. This is like even more intense. The text is going into extreme details about Joseph's life. And that is speaking of details about Israel and the end times, because that's what the book is all about. And so what we see here is the Jewish people in the end times relating to the nations, right? Relating to Pharaoh, representing the nations. And what did they get? The best land. They're put in charge.
That's right.
And they're considered highly successful. That's Abraham's blessing. That's the experience of the Jewish people wherever they go.
Amen.
And that's the blessing the Jewish people was entrusted to pass on to the nations. So they're here in this Gentile nation to bless Pharaoh, to bless Egypt, really to save their lives, to preserve life, to use their fruitfulness to feed the nations. Right? All right. That's a little picture of Jewish people in the end times. Verse 7. Then Joseph brought his father Jacob and presented him to Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. I don't know if you remember, there's a little principle in the book of Hebrews when the author is talking about how Abraham paid the tithes to Melchizedek, and Melchizedek blessed Abraham, and he says that the greater always blesses the lesser. That's what we have here. But look at this picture here. You have the President of the United States, the richest and most powerful man in the world, Pharaoh. And you have a man, 130 years old, coming from a famine. He has nothing. He has nothing. This is a dirt poor man. But he knows who he is. And he comes into the presence of Pharaoh, and he's not apologizing. He's not timid about who he is. He goes straight up to Pharaoh, and he blesses Pharaoh. I love that. He's just who he is, and he's bold. He knows who he is, right? He knows what he has from God. And then Pharaoh said to Jacob, we're going to slow down a little bit here because this is just beautiful. Pharaoh said to Jacob, how many years have you lived? How many years have you lived? All right, let's break this because this is way too good here. This how many, in the Hebrew, kama, or kama. Kama yemei shnei hayecha. Well, the ka means like. We sing this, mika mocha, mika, me, who, ka, it's like. Ha, you. Who is like you? So ka means like, right? And ma means what? It's in Hebrew. It's just how do you ask? Ask. You ask what? And so the phrase, the word literally says, what is it like? You put what and like. What is it like? And then what follows is, follow with me, right? What follows is the days. You know, in the English it says how many years, but in the Hebrew it says what are the days of the years of your life like? That's really what Pharaoh is asking. It's not a question of quantity, but it's a question of quality. Not how old are you, but how has your life been? How has your life been? And so now we see the Jacob's answer. But before we even get to Jacob's answer, you know me, I just like to go a little deeper. So I asked myself, what in the world does the word year mean? So I went searching, and what does the word year mean in Hebrew? Shana. You know, we say Shana Tova, right? Good year. Shana is the word for year. Well, it turns out in the Hebrew is Shana. It's related to the word, we know the word Mishnah. The Mishnah. The Mishnah is the repetition. It's the Jewish, the very first portion of Jewish tradition. And it is called the Mishnah because that word means to repeat. And the reason why it's called that is because you memorize it by repeating it. So you memorize Jewish tradition, all the rulings and all of this by repeating it to yourself. So it was called the repetition. And that's related to the word year. Mishnah, Shana. You can hear the similar root consonants there. What does it have to do with it? Well, what is a year? A year is a repetition of a cycle. It's a repetition of a cycle. How have the repetitions of your cycles been, Jacob? Do you go through this cycle year after year? How has it been? Not only that, but the cycles really have to do with agriculture. Because the cycles have to do with the sun and the moon. And so it has to do with the seasons of the year, which determines your agriculture. So he's asking, Pharaoh I don't think Pharaoh even has a clue what he's asking. But the Spirit of God does. Right? So the Spirit of God is really asking Jacob, how is your agriculture? Comparing your life to a yearly cycle of agriculture, have you been fruitful? That's the question. Have you been fruitful? Has your agriculture been fruitful? Has the cycle of your years, year after year, has it been fruitful? And so we're ready now for Jacob's answer. He says, so Jacob said to Pharaoh, the years of my sojourning, and here again, instead of the word year, we have the days of the years of my sojourning. So why is it throwing in the days and the years when in the English it doesn't make sense to put days with year? You know, the days of the years. A day is the same thing. It's a repetition of a cycle. It's a daily cycle. You have a yearly cycle. You have the sun. This is really the sun. This is the sun, right? Rotating on its own axle, but then again also, or actually the earth rotating on its own axle and going around the sun. You can see how good of a scientist I am, right? And so he gives him the number, right? 130 years. But then he says that they have been few and unpleasant. Well, you know what the word for unpleasant is? Ra. Evil. Unfruitful. Unfruitful. Basically, I've had a rough life, Pharaoh. It's been rough. He was honest. But you know, the text is going to say a little later that he dwelt, that he lived in, not dwelled, but lived in Egypt 17 years. And those were the best years of his life. So he's going to die. Yeah, he's going to die at 147. That last was the best. Yes. That's good news. You know what I thought? You know what I thought, and you probably thought about this too. You know, I think, well, you know, what are we going to look like when when all is said and done, we die, we're resurrected? I want to look like a 30-year-old. I don't want to look like the age when I die. You know? I mean, I hope I die at 96. That's my goal, 96. After that, whatever. But I want to make it to 96. And someday I'll tell you why. But I don't want to look like a 96-year-old, when I'm resurrected, right? I want to look like a 30-year-old. I'm sure you have those thoughts too. Working on it. But the Lord is, in our lives, He's working towards, really, you said it very, very well, saving the best for last. Because it is when you have all of this wisdom and all of this life, all of this rough life, and all of these years of unfruitfulness, and then He comes and He brings everything. When he brings your agriculture finally to the point of fruitfulness, that's the best you. Like Paul said, even though the external is wasting away, internally, I'm better, I'm stronger. That's and Jacob's not even there yet, but he will get there. Right? God still is working in him to get him to that point, even here on earth. So he's honest. He says it's been rough, it's been evil. Just plain, it has not been fruitful. And then he says, so unpleasant have been the days of the years of my life. That's what it says in Hebrew, the days of the years of my life. And you see how now we have the word life, right? Now this is the word chayim, life. And it says, nor have I attained the years, the days of the years of that my fathers lived during the days of their sojourning. Here we have the word lived again. We could highlight it that way. During the days of their sojourning. And Jacob again blesses Pharaoh. And watch this. And he went out from his presence. Now it finally uses the word yatsah.
Okay.
When Jacob goes out from the presence of Pharaoh. This is prophetic. It was saving. The Spirit of God was saving that word, that verb, to use it in a meaningful way. To prophesy the whole people of Israel, 400 years later, they're going to go out of the presence, away from the presence of Pharaoh in an exodus. But just real quick, understanding what the exodus is. Because here the presence of Pharaoh, the word presence is the word panim, face, from the face of. We use this word every Shabbat in the Aaronic blessing. All right. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord shine his face. And the face has a couple of functions, at least. One is to turn. That in the Hebrew, the word panim is related to one of the words, to turn. So it is to give your attention to. So you turn to God away from something and you turn into him and you start directing your life toward him. Or the opposite, right? That's one function of the word panim, face. But the other function is kind of like what we see here and what we see in the Aaronic blessing, to show approval or disapproval. That's the function of the face. Therefore, we have in the Aaronic blessing, it's really all about approval. May the Lord show you, may the Lord be pleased with you, and may you see it in his face. That's really the gist of it. And so to come out of the presence of the face of Pharaoh, to have an exodus, is for the Lord to deliver you from the disapproval of the enemy. Really, that's what we're talking about here, right? And the way this disapproval comes, again, you have two things three things in your, well, four things on your face. You have eyes, nose, mouth, and ears. And the mouth is obviously the enemy is going to speak to you, right? That's his disapproval. He's going to let you know what he thinks of you. Because he sees you in a certain way. And he wants you to see yourself the way he sees you.
Absolutely.
That's what he does. And his ears and his nose are for discerning. But he's full of, he lost his true north, so everything that comes out of his mouth is a lie. He's telling you what he hears. Remember, Satan has a boss. Satan has a master. 1 Corinthians 15 says that the last enemy that the Father is going to put under the feet of Yeshua is death. You would think the last enemy is Satan. No, it's actually death. Satan serves death. I'm not saying death is a person, but it is a force, a power that dominates him when he began to dominate him when he opened himself to rebellion against God. So what he sees is death. What he hears is death. What he speaks is death. What he discerns is death. That's what he is hoping to convince you of about you. So everything he's going to say is, you are. You are. It's about your identity. You are this. You are this. You are not this. You are not that. So it's all about identity. Because he's full of it. He can't help but throw to you what he has in him. He's speaking out of what overflows inside of him. His fears. His condemnation. That's who he is. That's how he lives. Remember those demons? What do you have to do with us, Son of God? It's not the time to throw us into its condemnation and fear, and that's how the enemy wants people to live. It's exactly that picture of the demons. That's what he wants you to live, how he wants you to live and think about yourself and see yourself as. But God takes you in an Exodus-like out of his presence, out of his disapproving face toward you. And in case you miss it, I'm going to say it. The Exodus experience is all about pouring out plagues on Pharaoh. That's how God delivers. He brings judgment on the demons. He brings condemnation on our enemies to deliver us. Power. His outstretched arm. That's how God delivers. We're going to be in Exodus next week, actually. So we're getting close. That's why the text is talking about Exodus. I mean, we've seen Genesis. It's all the Exodus all over Genesis. And that's what that means. So, all right, let's see what we can finish up here. I want to jump because we've seen this in the best of the land, which is a fruitful land. Let's see. I want us to take a look at the last verse, actually, in that chapter. And then we can conclude with that. Sorry if this makes you a little dizzy. Here's what I was telling you. Jacob lived in the land of Egypt, verse 28. This is actually where the portion begins, right? Jacob lived, this is a word for live, not for dwell. He lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. And so... Okay, let's begin with this here. So when the time for Israel to die drew near, he called his son Joseph. We could say some about this, but we really don't have time. He called and it's related to Leviticus, and I'm passing it by. I wanted you to notice that. So he called his son Joseph and said to him, "Please, if I have found favor in your sight, place now your hand under my thigh and deal with me in kindness and faithfulness." The word kindness is chesed. It means covenant faithfulness. That's what that means. Covenant faithfulness. So Jacob is asking Joseph, let's make a covenant here. Okay? You're going to be obligated to do this. To be faithful to the covenant. And the word faithfulness is actually the word emet, which is truth. So be true to your word, right? Be faithful to the covenant. Be true to your word, Joseph. This is as powerful. It's like sign here the dotted line in front of these witnesses. You are obligating yourself under this contract, right? Under this covenant. So please do not bury me in Egypt. That's the request. But when I lie down with my fathers, you shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place. And he said, I will do as you have said. And he said, no. You got to swear. You got to swear. You know what swearing means? To swear is Shavah. We have Beersheba, the well of the oath of Sheva. But it sounds so much like Shabbat. It sounds so much like 7. Because they're related. And I learned this week. An oath is when it literally is you seven yourself to the person. What does that mean?
What word was that you used?
You seven yourself. You seven yourself. Yes. What does that mean? What is 7 the number of? You know a little better than that. Completion. Perfection is a Greek concept. Completion is a biblical concept. So when you seven yourself to someone, you're saying, I am going to be complete with you. There will lack nothing in my obligation, in what you're asking me to do, what I'm promising to do. It will lack nothing. I seven myself to you. And that's what Joseph does. So he swore to him. And we're going to conclude with this. Then Israel, notice it didn't say Jacob. Then Israel, because it did say Jacob right before. It's been saying Jacob the whole time. And then it says, then Israel bowed. Look at the word in worship. It's in italics, meaning it's not in the text. So the translators are trying to make sense of this phrase. It's like, okay, he bows. Obviously, he's not worshiping Joseph, but he bows. Okay, he's worshiping. That's what the translators are wrestling here. But look, Israel bowed at the head of the bed. Bowing doesn't necessarily mean worship. It is worship if you bow to a deity, but you can bow to a person, and it means to honor them. What was Jacob's dream? My father, my mother, and my brothers are going to bow to me.
Whoa.
Now it's happening. But this gets better because, again, what are we talking about? We're talking about Israel in the end times. And this whole chapter, I want you to get this. This whole chapter is about Yeshua having a close relationship with the nations and getting the nations to favor Israel.
Very good.
You understand that whoever protected Jews during the Holocaust were because they really believed in God. Amen. Jews were persecuted in the name of Christ. Those who were absolutely faithless. But the ones who protected the Jewish people were the ones that truly honor Yeshua. So Yeshua, in the end times, gets the nations to favor Israel. And Israel bows to Yeshua. This Joseph here at the head of the bed, this is Yeshua. In the end times. Joseph is one of the foremost figures of Yeshua in the Hebrew Bible. So this really is Israel in the end times, finally bowing down to Yeshua.